In video 9, we're going to be looking at effects and how to start adding effects to different layers. And I know you might not always think about adding an effect to a text layer, but you can do so, and there's a few, and I'm going to give you kind of variations. But the first thing I want to look at, first question, what do you want to do? That's always the first question, is what do you want to do? So, at the beginning, it's kind of difficult to figure out what you want to do because you got to know, well, what effects are there, and how can I apply them? So the second question is, what can do that effect that maybe I want to do. So we're going to look at some of the effects that you can use on text. And again, looking at, I'm going to go ahead and lower this timeline panel, and I'm going to go ahead and open up effects and presets. Some of the effects that work really well with adding, to text, maybe are blur and sharpen. So maybe I wanted to add, a fast blur or a radial blur. Those might work well. A lot of times the Gaussian blur you might use every now and then, but a radial blur can work pretty cool. So if maybe I want to add that, so all I have to do is drag and I can drop on and already kind of added to, as you notice. But I can add it to that. I'm going to go ahead and undo. I can add it right to the composition panel, to that layer. I can come down here and I can add it to that layer. So there's a couple different ways, and even with if I have this selected and I come over here and I double click it, it's going to add to it, and it's going to show up in here, and I can then go ahead and change. So maybe I wanted to start with a really high amount, so maybe I'm like 84%, and I'm going to go ahead and click that keyframe, and I'm going to come to 1 second, and I'm going to add and go to 0. So it will then give it effect that maybe I want to. This will probably take a few seconds to render, as you can see, but it's going to kind of give it that radial blur. It's going to almost like a radius. We're noticing that it's kind of got that circular path, and it's going to change, as you can see. It's kind of a cool effect. So there's a couple different, blur effects that we can use on text that will work and, be effective. Okay, so that's kind of our effect. Maybe someone that got knocked in the head and has a concussion is coming back, so you can give them that. What, how many fingers are you saying? So that's the first one. I'm going to go ahead and undo that. Or I can even come up here. One thing that is nice when you start working with effects is I might say, add multiple effects on one layer. I can come over here and I can say, you know what? Let's see what that doesn't look like right now without that effect. So it's just deselecting. So the FX is going to mean effect. And if I deselect that, it will take that effect off. And I can also just take this and just delete it. And so that effect is off. A couple other ones, I'm going to close this up, is maybe distort. I can come over here, and there's multiple ones for distort. You can play around with that. There's some cool ones that you can use. And a couple other options might be generate. Some that we have through here. Another one that we have that I use sometimes is perspective. I might use something within the perspective. A drop shadow can work really well. But the one I think use a lot, and we're going to get to in a second, is I've got, again, a stylized, but I'm going to go back to generate. And with generate, this light sweep, I think I use this almost on all of the things because, again, it's just another way to kind of highlight and have the eye, just something to grab the attention of the eye. So within generate, I might use this light sweep, and I'm going to kind of show you how to apply this light sweep. So looking over here, the first thing I do is, I got to figure out what direction do I want this light sweep to go. So I might say, at 1 second, if we've got this, let me go ahead and expand that a little bit. We might want this effect to stay up for 4 seconds, that text. And maybe at 2 seconds, I might say, you know what, I think people's eyes are kind of wandering a little bit now, or not really paying attention. So I might say, hey, let's go ahead and let's take this direction, and I'm going to go ahead and start there, and I'm going to go, and I think I'm going to go in a couple, few frames. And one way that I'm going to kind of show you a shortcut, I was using shift and page up or page down, but if I do page down, I'm going to move along the time frame or the timeline if I want to, and a page up will move back towards 0. So that's one thing sometimes you might want to do. So let me go ahead and open up this effects, and even though I'm manipulating my effects up here in our effects panel, I can also do so down here within the timeline. So let me go ahead and open that up, and notice that this was added, the effects down here, light sweep, and now I can come down here and actually see where I'm making and adding these keyframes, which I usually have open because it's very helpful. So I've added this first frame at 2 seconds, or this first keyframe. I'm going to go, let's just maybe go a few frames in. Let's see, if I go back to 2 frames, or 2 second. I'm going to go, let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, I'm going to go 8 frames in. And I now want this to sweep all the way across. Okay, so it's going to go all the way across the letter. And it already has the keyframe. And I'm going to go ahead and F9, just easy ease this. And if I play this, and I'm going to take off the full screen, but if I play this, we see it real quick. See how that real quick light sweep? There it was. Okay, but it's not quite bold enough for me, so I might drop it somewhere in between and say, you know what? We can change this width. We can make it really wide if we want to, but that sometimes, might not be the look you're looking for. Maybe same with sweep intensity. That might sometimes be what you're looking for. Same with edge intensity, and edge intensity can be pretty cool. I want you to look at the top of the E. So when I add that edge intensity, see how it starts to kind of go right on top of that edge? And this is a really crisp look that you can make it look, especially sometimes I might change smooth. And the edge thickness, I'm changing that edge thickness, so I'm kind of just changing a little bit of what I want to do in the light color, but I can change the light color or even the direction if I wanted to change directions and sweep a little bit differently, but I'm going to stay at 30. But so I've changed, the edge thickness, the edge intensity, and the sweep intensity a little bit, and so let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and change this. And I just want to look at really quick just what's in this work area. I'm going to go to full screen and we're going to play through. So we notice it kind of has that effect, and it stops over here just because probably where I started. But see how that's something really quick that if I were to select this entire work area and say, hey, let's watch with this. So this is maybe comes up on a screen, and then we have that quick, and I definitely would want to switch because I noticed right at this beginning we've got this directional. I'm going to pull this a little bit over further, but this is one way we can say, hey, effects. Effects, we're yelling at them, effects, okay? So those are some really quick ways to add effects, and one thing to know is that if you are looking at effects and you don't have the After Effects open, I do have some, I don't want to say cheat sheets, but I have multiple PDFs that will have pages of the effects, and it's broken down just like it is over here in the effects palette. I've pretty much labeled them all. I don't have every single one of these, but I do have quite a few that I think will be better to kind of look at, so that way you can type them in. Again, like I've said before, you can say light sweep and it brings it up. And then, so that's one thing to look at with the closing of chapter 2 is all those different variations. And now, what is going to be the best way to animate, whether it's movement, whether it's adding the animators, whether it's adding the effects, whether it's putting on a path. So we've got to think of these now as you create your first exercise of trying to tell a story using text.